Welcome to the Healers Café, the #1 show for medical practitioners and holistic healers to have heart to heart conversations about their day to day lives while sharing their expertise for improving your health and wellness.
So, welcome to the Healers Cafe. And today I have with me Jennifer Neville. And she has an interesting story. She was a former professional golfer and then became a certified hypnotherapist. So, mindset, as we all know, is very important in sports. And obviously, becoming a hypnotherapist, now there's like a wider range of people that Jennifer is able to help. So I wanted to discuss with you specifically what's the difference between mindset and willful positivity and that type of thing. But before we go there, what happened? Like, how did you go from golfing to deciding that this is what you're going to be doing?
So I played golf my whole life since I was 9 years old, and my whole identity was wrapped up in golf. And since I was 9 years old, I always had the dream of becoming a professional athlete. And I knew from an early age, especially in golf, that mindset was really it's 90% mental. You're doing all the physical stuff, but to really reach that elite space, probably for any athlete, it's going to be contingent on having the proper mindset. And that became something that I was really passionate about. And I would study sort of more spiritual and esoteric teachers, learning like Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, or just how I could be more still, having like an early on meditation practice, which sort of reverse led me to from like I started esoteric to becoming way more practical and logical and learning about the subconscious mind and really how we create everything. We create our experience of reality based off of the thoughts and the things that we believe. And so it was just natural when I walked away from golf, because I knew it wasn't something that I wanted to pursue anymore. By the time I had played for 4 years, I just knew it wasn't like something I wanted to continue doing. And it was really hard for me to walk away from, because my whole identity was wrapped up in it. I didn't know who I was if I wasn't a golfer, but I always knew how passionate I was about mindset and helping other people and my own healing journey. So right after I had finished playing golf, I started getting hypnotherapy done on myself. I found like this amazing hypnotherapist who changed my life. And it was like a couple years later that I sort of sat down and decided, okay, I should be doing, I was doing the mindset coaching, but then I realized, like, why haven't I got my hypnotherapy certification yet? I'm so passionate about this. So I sort of buckled down. It was a year long, 500 hours. And I am so happy because the year of studying it alone helped me so much. And to your testament of like willfulness versus like mindset, I used to always be that person who was like positive, or I have to be positive. I need to believe in myself. And I always had that hope. But then there was this part of me that would always say, my hope is like, I almost resented that hope that I felt. And I realized it was this false positivity. I was being positive, but I wasn't believing in the positivity, not really. And it wasn't until I started doing like the deep inner work and doing this work with my subconscious that I was able to sort of give myself the power and give myself the control of like my experience of reality. And I was able to kind of shift into not this like false confidence or this false positivity where it was like I'm relying on hope, but actually feeling like I have a grasp on maybe not the world around me, but the way that I react and engage with the world, I started being able to like control that. And it made me more confident in myself, which in turn kind of, I relied less on the hope or the willfulness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does, yeah. Yeah. So here you're sort of in part through your own experience explaining kind of the difference is one, it's a belief, but you're not aligned with it fully.
Yeah.
Then there's a story or another set of thoughts that contradict your statement,
Yes.
right? And therefore the contradicting statement negates it
Yes.
because you're not true to yourself,
Exactly.
right?
And a part of me, because that's something that we practice in hypnotherapy, it's called parts therapy. And it wasn't that, like, exactly when you say a part of myself, there was a part of me that felt positive and hope, but then I was not acknowledging the part of me that was maybe scared and maybe didn't have the proof of, okay, you're saying all these things, but it's never worked out for us in the past. So I don't trust the hope that you're trusting. And it's bringing those two parts of yourself into alignment so that, that part of me had something to trust, which ended up being myself.
Right. So are you able to explain in a simple way what that process is of joining what would appear to be contradictory in a sense, it's equivalent but opposite viewpoints?
Yeah. So in hypnotherapy, when we do a parts therapy session, it's really cool because it's essentially going in and you're talking to the part of you that self-sabotages, or you're getting to the root of like who this part of you is. So say if there's a part of you that doesn't like public speaking, or you freeze up every time, like you can go in with parts therapy and you can communicate directly to that part. And basically you're amplifying, there's an intake process beforehand, and then you're amplifying the emotions and calling that part to the surface while you're under hypnosis and interviewing that part and finding out like why it's behaving the way it's doing, why it's sabotaging you, what's it afraid of, what is this stemming from? And then you facilitate dialogue between these two parts of you. And it's interesting because you'll see clients like fighting themselves. And that's what's happening. That's the internal dialogue that's happening every time, say you would go to public speak. You're having this fight and I'm getting to witness it and facilitate, obviously, the gestalt, what we call it, like bringing it into oneness, where it's like, okay, well, what can you do to help this part feel more safe so that it can show up how it needs to? And part, what do you need in order to feel safe helping so-and-so achieve their ultimate goal, right?
Right. So how when people choose to do hypnotherapy, do you that there's a lot of belief systems about it that make people hesitate to do it, or have you had to deal with a lot of misconceptions about it?
Definitely a lot of misconceptions. I think people see horror movies like Get Out and think that, they're not going to be in control. But the reality is like, if you're booking a hypnotherapy session, that's the first step of you want to get better. You want to, there's a lot of stop smoking clients, people who want to stop smoking. And there's a part of you that wants to get better. There's also a part of you that wants to continue smoking, probably. And then that's that internal battle. But normally by the time people have booked the hypnotherapy, they're open to it. but yeah, you get all types of people. You get people who are skeptical. You get people who are like super esoteric and want to go to past lives and things like that. So it's a wide spectrum, but the way that they train us, which I really liked this, it was from this perspective of you don't show up to somebody's sandbox with your tools. You show up to their sandbox and you have to learn how to use their tools.
Mm,
So that's part of like even before you take a person into hypnosis, you are finding out like, what is your higher perspective? What is your, what's your relationship to higher perspective? And really getting to know who they are so that you're able to communicate them in their voice,
mhm, mhm. Yeah, no, I see that. I mean, it's important because otherwise you're
Mm-hmm.
on two different pages, right? And
Yeah.
gotta be, yeah, I think it's really important that the hypnotherapist be flexible to use the language
Mm-hmm.
of the client. Now, as far as languaging in that sense, if a person brings, and again, you don't have to agree, of course, right? In fact, it's nicer if you don't. Because I get to learn more stuff. But so let's say you have an inner conflict, right? You
Mm-hmm.
go back to the stage talking or something, right? Or
Yes.
so yet, I was reading that you had quite a success with weight loss. But
Mm.
there's a big epidemic of that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you have one part of you that clearly wants to lose weight, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's a whole bunch of misconceptions about it and false things about it and false hopes and the magic pills that don't work and things like that, right? So there's
Yeah.
a lot of like what I would call rational, intellectual stuff.
Yeah.
Gotta, there's a certain amount of truth that must be surfaced, right? Like if you're totally toxic and you want to lose weight, good luck, right? Like, so you have
Yeah.
strategy that makes sense on some level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got the inner part where if there's like a sugar addiction or whatever, those are obvious, evident self-sabotages, right?
Yes. Yes.
Sure. That I can understand how a conflict like that, you want to go, what did the sugar do? Was it a soother? When did you get it?
Mm-hmm.
Or young? And, is there a story or a feeling attached to it? Is this how you get, how you feel looked after, etc. So you're again
Mm-hmm.
breaking belief systems and such, right?
Yes.
But a lot of that, as far as I look at it, I can see it rationally. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like this discussion is not under hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
Why is it that it's under hypnotherapy that you see changes?
So I think because one, and especially when we're talking about weight loss, because that's something, again, I'm very passionate about helping people with, just because the weight loss is sort of it's a disguise for all of the emotions that are stored in the body. And I think that's what's happening is trauma gets stuck in the body, emotions get stuck in the body. It's a lack of processing because, again, we're sort of a lot of people struggle with like emotional eating our feelings. You hear all these things, and it's definitely true. So when you're under hypnosis, and you don't always, like, I don't always have to take my clients into hypnosis with the method that I use. I've kind of simplified it, and I just immediately get them into that feeling state. Then I don't even have to take them under, because once you access the emotions, you're there. You're that child again.
Right.
You're that part of you, because even the parts of you, they're normally a hurt inner child, or it's taking you back to these feelings when you break it down to like the bare bones of what am I feeling and how do these feelings make, what do I believe about myself because of these feelings, you are in your body, you're in the feeling state, you're back in that memory. And it's so easy to get somebody, okay, what does this remind you of? What does this remind you of? A memory from childhood, a relationship from childhood, and they're there. But I think some people struggle to get to that place, and that's when it comes in handy having like the induction techniques to have somebody who's maybe more repressed access that stored emotion.
What would your life be like if you were pain-free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
Okay, I think that's really well explained. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I've tried, of course, I've done hypnotherapy, as a doctor in
Yeah.
the past, I have to say. I've tried so many different things to see
Yeah.
what would be a good referral for people. But that was a bit my conclusion, is that if you can connect to the feeling state,
Mm-hmm.
actual emotion, and can you realize, oh my God, I was like this when I was 5, or
Yeah.
happened, you've kind of done the process. I mean, in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
you have to,
Yeah.
child and love it, and whatever, and understand that it did the best it could, and all the what's normally done, so that you bring it up to speed and go, hey, now you two are friends and you're one, actually, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. And having them communicate with that inner child is always so powerful. And it's obviously, not to sound like crazy, but when I have my clients and they'll start crying
Yeah.
and they're like, oh no, I'm gonna start crying, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, no, this is making me so happy. Like you're having a release,
Yeah.
like that's so good. I
Mhm.
want you to cry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's very different than, I think in our society, there's a lot of victimhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then the crying is more like the complaining of, oh,
Yeah.
for me, this happened to me, they did it to me.
Mm-hmm.
When you kind of go from the position of radical responsibility, then you're in another state of mind, right?
Yes.
You you're not going to have that. It's going to be a release cry. It's a true
Yeah.
healing cry. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
cry, right?
Yeah.
As long as you're in the victim, you've created the story. You believe the story more than the emotion,
Yes.
right? You don't want the emotion exactly, so you cover it with a well narrated story. That's kind of how propaganda works.
Yes.
You
Yes.
So if you're, once you let go of, if you take, how am I, in which way am I responsible for this?
Mm-hmm.
Once you have that discussion, it's like emotions can really come. At least that's how I've seen it. And
Yeah.
you're much
Well,
into it.
Well, and once they have this realization of, okay, this initial thing happened when I was young and a child, and perhaps I was a victim to this circumstance, but then I think the bigger realization comes when they realize, like, oh, but I've been perpetuating this with myself.
Right.
I've been doing it to myself. It
Mhm.
happened that one time, but I've continued the cycle. And I think that's when people have that big shift and that breakthrough, when they can expose that story that they've been telling themselves.
Yes. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's what we do. We carry it on, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So how much do you think consciousness plays into the healing process?
So I know that they teach us in hypnotherapy, the conscious mind needs to be present for all the subconscious work, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's okay if you fall asleep. And we really do a lot of testing to make sure that you're not asleep, because your conscious mind needs to be aware of what's happening. And it's like teamwork,
Mhm.
but I think consciousness, like I just see it as that's kind of that part of us that wants the change, but then there's that subconscious that's more, it runs on auto programming, right? And it's really hard to override that programming.
Mhm.
So that's what we're striving for, is how to at least be aware of our base programming, I guess. And that's what happened to us in childhood. And it's not saying like we can override the coding by at least realizing like that fight or flight response when it kicks in, what triggers it, and how to say like, this isn't real, this isn't happening, and keep systems moving forward, not revert back to that old programming.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I think too, it helps when people understand that the subconscious, it's really its job is to keep you safe, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that was. So in childhood, you probably did exactly what was the safest thing for you to do, but then it's not necessarily the behavior that is correct for an adult.
Yes, exactly.
So it's like that's where I can see the bridge between the subconscious as being
Mm-hmm.
automatic safety,
Yeah.
not there to experience a brand new life or anything.
No.
It's there to repeat, the this is this is what works, this is, be quiet, and whatever the story was, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it requires a lot of conditioning, to make those changes, which is where like our conscious mind comes into play.
Mhm.
And yeah, just kind of recognizing what that default programming is. What is that, and it's how you call it self-sabotage, right? But that's our default programming. Whatever it's reverting back to, the more that we can build awareness of that, the more we can like combat it.
And how important do you think the other way, rather than reverting back, is to positively set up, whether it's systems, trainings,
Mm-hmm.
like new habits? How effective do you think that is?
I think it's very effective. I think the subconscious responds to repetition and conditioning. So the more you repeat the actions, and that's where kind of the conscious discipline comes in, of having some kind of discipline or routine, whether it's listening to affirmations or doing some kind of action or forming some kind of habit and really beating that into yourself. That is something that I learned from my professional golf days or being a golfer. Everything was repetition. It wasn't about practice makes perfect. It was about practice breeds confidence, because then when you're under those high pressure situations, I always knew what my faults were. I always knew what was, if I started getting like, I knew what my misses were, right? So when I'd be under pressure, those misses would start presenting themselves more, but I was aware of it. And so a lot of my practice was in an attempt to like not fall into that, or when those high pressure situations come, I feel confident enough to not revert back to those misses. And even if I do revert back to those misses, having like a plan to get myself out of it, even if it's playing to the misses, you know? And it's the same thing, I think, with any goal you're trying to achieve. Repetition and just conditioning.
So what's without names and all that, obviously, but can you share someone you've been able to help that either was really meaningful, totally surprising to you, or yeah, I don't know, you know, that just made your day and made you love what you do?
I've had so many people that I've helped. You know, I've helped people work through very deep trauma. And at first that was something that I knew working in what I work in, that was going to come up, things like that was going to come up, and that scared me. But once I started helping clients through that, it was this really beautiful experience. And I learned so much too about the mind and the universe and forgiveness through witnessing and holding space for people. But, you know, I've gotten to work with people on, especially with the weight loss, it's been like a big thing where you're focused more on the body and there might be physical pain in the body, that you focus on that physical pain and it ends up being this stored memory, this like very repressed memory. And once they clear that and release that, and then I get those messages talking about how they don't feel the pain anymore, those are really rewarding, I think, to help somebody process something that they've been avoiding for so long, you know? So long that it turned into a physical ailment.
And if you one more question and then I'll leave you with the final words, but can a person go to hypnotherapy, go in doing that? Is it like the appropriate thing when they have zero idea, but they have is something that they just can't shake, you know, like it could be a physical ailment, you know, that shake, or it could be an emotional state that they can't shake, you know, like you know, common ones these days are like regret, you know, or feeling what's the word, betrayed.
A
lot of people are complaining about that. So how would you address that? Like what's it? And again, I'm sure it's different, but and they've never done it. They don't know, you know, and they believe that it could work. So not all the misconceptions. How would you approach that?
Well, for starters, I just want to clarify that if anybody comes to me with like serious mental health concerns, they do part of like being a clinical hypnotherapist, you have to be signed off by a psychiatrist. Like a doctor has to basically have a letter of recommendation for that client. But utilizing things like betrayal, I help a lot of people in love and relationships, working on releasing from breakups or trauma from that. And I think hypnotherapy, like I said, it helps. And obviously, depending on the severity, in tandem with other, you know, therapies can help you a lot. I think that it helps you connect with yourself. And I do think that, especially if we're talking about relationships or anything that you're experiencing externally, and once you bring this awareness to, it really is you're creating all of this. And then you can get to the root of, why am I so affected by this? Because ultimately, and if people could grasp this, you know, because we get sucked into this world and everything that's happening to it, and the news and the propaganda, like you said, we're sucked into it all the time, and it makes us feel powerless and hopeless, and like we want to change it, but there's nothing that we can do. How do we get mass amounts of people to change? And hypnotherapy, or even doing this mindset work, I think helps people realize the first thing I have to do is get myself to a place where I'm not triggered or reacting to this. So that's helping you come to the root of why does this thing that I'm seeing in my reality make me so upset? And if I can find that peace within myself, then that what's happening external to me isn't going to have such a effect on me anymore, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, you know what? That's our time already.
Mhm.
Last few words, maybe where people could reach you, or how do you work, or website or information that you want to share.
Yes, my Instagram is Jennifer and Neville. And my website is Live Zen with Jen. If you're interested in coaching or anything of that sort, or just following me online and hearing what I have to say, then be sure to check those out. And again, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café. If you haven't already done so, please like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on, as I post a new podcast every Wednesday with tons of useful information and tips for natural healing that you won't want to miss.